alarmed when I realized that Rick Warren had actually studied under this man. And so I started looking at Rick Warren's books, and one of the things that he gave credit to was a man named Peter Drucker. Well, of course, at that time I thought, okay, Peter Drucker, a business guru, an economist, blah, blah. And so I started looking into Peter Drucker, and lo and behold, I discovered that Drucker was one of the original architects of something that came about back in the late 1980s. We began to notice that some of these education reform change agents like David Hornbeck, who went state to state around the country trying to market outcome-based education to the state legislators, he had used a term called human capital to refer to our children. Mm-hmm. And this term did not fly very well in the conservative farming state of Iowa, where I lived at the time. The parents were very incensed. The public was incensed. What do you mean our children are human capital? In other words, it had the implication that your child had some sort of an economic value, a dollar worth assigned to him. This is a horrendous concept. Yet I discovered that Peter Drucker not only had helped to forge that concept, that every child has an economic value to society, and that's with a capital S. And whenever he uses the word society, he means the state government. And so Drucker wrote some amazing articles in which he talked about every child having a knowledge capital, that the child could be assessed for how much knowledge they had to be assigned this worth in society. And so Drucker actually recommended that every child be assigned a portable voucher based on his economic value as a knowledge worker to society, and that therefore he could go from job to job, from school to school, lifelong labor, lifelong learning, and that he would always be amounting to more and more economic value to the state. And all of this, ironically, would be performance-driven. It would be assessed. These assessments would go into a data bank, and the worker, this poor child who would then become an adult, would be rewarded for good economic value and penalized for poor economic value. And once they were in the system, they would not be able to escape. Now, Drucker wrote about this in very utopian language. He was raised in Germany. His parents were part of the Vienna Circle. Very, very liberal. The whole Freud, everything was going on in Vienna at that point in his life, and his parents' house was actually one of the headquarters of the Vienna Circle. And so he had this very utopian worldview that we could create this paradise here on Earth, that we could actually create an organic community that would function as a whole organism. And so he tried this in America. He actually wrote a book called The Concept of the Corporation. This was well over 50 years ago, probably 60 years ago. And it didn't fly in America. He actually had to work with Deming to institute this over in Japan, total quality management.
Okay.
The same thing is outcome-based education. In other words, you've got to have everything up to par. You've got to measure everything. You've got to standardize everything. Everyone has to perform. And so as I was reading Drucker, I began to realize that he was talking about human beings. And so I went and I talked to my father. Now, my father had been an executive at a large manufacturing firm all of his life until he retired. And I said, Dad, what do you know about Peter Drucker? And he says, oh, I was trained in Peter Drucker stuff. And I said, well, that's great. Tell me about it. And so he said, well, he was the head of quality control for this whole manufacturing firm. And he said, had to conform to 1/1,000,000th of an inch. They had to be that perfect. There were no room for any error. We had to be 1/1,000,000th of an inch. All human error had to be accounted for and dealt with. That was our standard performance. I said, yeah, but Dad, Peter Drucker's talking about doing this with children. Mm-hmm. And my father about fell off his chair. He said, you're kidding me. He said, you can't do that with children. I said, I know. I said, just think, Dad, you have a grandson who has autism. How would he have any knowledge capital or human capital in Peter Drucker's world? And my dad was he was absolutely shocked and appalled. That's the totalitarian aspect of this whole plan. Peter Drucker was hoping that if he could assign an economic value to each person, this portable voucher, this portable credential, that would then be the ultimate choice in the world, a global choice. In other words, you as a person would be tied into the whole global society, the whole global system, and that's how your whole life would be run.